How's it going, everyone? Ryan here. Yes, the one and only. And I stand before you today to show you the rest of the movies that I've seen from 2018 and give you all my brief thoughts on each of them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2. Before I start reviewing these films though, I just want to fill you guys in on why it has taken me so long to upload this video. Ever since I uploaded part 1, I've been so incredibly busy and overwhelmed finishing 2 extremely difficult and stressful college semesters. It really took a lot out of me and left me feeling so exhausted for months on end. However, once summer came around, I finally became determined in finishing this video before it ends up being too late again. I completely apologize for having you guys wait this long. I really hope you guys can forgive me and understand why it hasn't been easy for me. With that said, I also want to lay a few ground rules as well. First off, documentaries and straight-to-TV movies don't count. So no, you won't be seeing Won't You Be My Neighbor on this list. However, if it was, it would easily be my #1 favorite of the year. Just thought you should know that. Secondly, I'm going to briefly discuss my thoughts on each film in the order that they were released. Which means this time, instead of starting in August or September where I last left off, I'm going all the way back to June to cover all the other films that I missed first. One last thing you should already know is that after I'm done talking about the rest of the films that I've seen in 2018, I'll then go over my updated list on the top 5 favorite movies as well as my updated pie chart. And that's pretty much all I have left to say. So with all that out of the way, let's get this started. Upgrade. Okay, now what do you get when you take the movie Venom, replace Tom Hardy with someone that looks identical to him, in this case Logan Marshall Green, mix it with a little bit of Blade Runner, and give it a revenge plot? Well, you get Upgrade. With its fantastic performances, excellent world building, entertaining action sequences, and an unpredictable story with twists and turns, this film gives such a unique spin on the sci-fi genre and elevates it above just your ordinary revenge tale. I especially loved how it handled Gray and his relationship with Stem. Even though I do wish there was a lot more focus given to the supporting characters, as well as certain things that Gray goes through in the movie, I also felt like the movie could have left a much stronger impact on me had it been somewhat longer, but I still overall loved Upgrade and I'm very glad that I saw it. Hereditary. Have you ever had a film that riveted you so much that you became on the verge of loving it but just quite couldn't? Hereditary was one of those films for me. Now don't get me wrong, Hereditary is a very well-made psychological horror drama with some amazing performances, especially from Toni Collette, very well fleshed out characters, emotionally impactful scenes, some excellent foreshadowing, and a haunting atmosphere. With that said though, the film really does suffer from its extremely slow pacing with scenes that go on for far too long, convoluted storytelling, and the entire third act goes completely off the rails. None of these problems were deal breakers for me, but they really did prevent me from loving this film. When it's all said and done though, I liked Hereditary a lot, and I really admired how well made of a psychological horror flick it was. 8th Grade. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but I honestly really didn't care for 8th Grade that much like everyone else clearly did. Okay, I will admit that there are a few solid performances, well done scenes, some well handled themes, and I've definitely experienced 8th Grade before. It fucking sucks. But how this film goes about its portrayal of 8th Grade is very contrived and stupid. There are so many cringeworthy scenes, but they never feel authentic. They just feel extremely cliched and uncomfortably forced. Its tone is extremely over the top. The majority of the characters are painfully stereotypical. It literally hammers in every single message it tries to give. And for someone who was at his worst in 8th Grade, I seriously failed to connect to anything this film tried to throw at me. Listen, 8th Grade is by no means a bad movie, but I just found it to be pretty meh. Easily the most overrated film of 2018 if you ask me. Klansmen. So this film was based on a true story, and it definitely shows. It takes place back in the 70s when an African American cop was in charge of an investigation involving the KKK, and by God this was a damn good film. BlacKkKlansman has fantastic performances, an excellent script, amazing execution, and it does such a great job at representing the themes of racism and how negatively it has affected us as people over the years. Now, I will admit that the film does become slow and unnecessarily heavy-handed at times, especially with its tacked-on ending, but aside from that, I still overall loved the movie and was pleasantly surprised by it. Searching. I'm still at a loss for words with how much they got away with filming Searching entirely through the internet perspective. And rather than limiting the film's storytelling like you'd expect, it actually enhances it. From its excellent performances to its relevant themes on how social media has affected us as people and its beyond engaging, unpredictable, and amazingly executed story, all of this makes for such a thoroughly gripping, suspenseful, and riveting experience that I could not help but adore. However, if I had any gripes with it, there were some plot conveniences here and there, and I did wish that it ended on a much stronger note. But aside from that, awesome film. It's an easy recommendation from me. The House with the Clock in Its Walls. The House with the Clock in Its Walls is a film that I honestly didn't really care for that much. Now don't get me wrong, it does have some neat ideas that make for some fun atmospheric tension inside the house, and Jack Black and Cate Blanchett work amazingly off of each other. But aside from that, the movie is filled with dumb subplots and cliches, the poop jokes weren't funny at all, the villains were extremely one-dimensional, and while we're on the subject, Jack Black baby is fucking terrifying. So yeah, The House with the Clock in Its Walls really didn't do much for me, and I just found it to be all around meh. Honestly, the only reason why I even went to go see this movie in the first place was just so I could see Michael Jackson's Thriller in IMAX 3D. Venom. Now, I will agree with the critics when I say this. Venom is a very stupid movie, but shit, I'd honestly be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy the fuck out of it. Mainly because the film gets so ridiculous and so over the top that I was laughing and enjoying myself the whole time. But even with Tom Hardy doing an excellent job as Eddie Brock, his relationship with the symbiote, and some cool Venom action sequences, the movie is filled to the brim with plot holes that make no sense, the story and character development is extremely hollow and weak, the villain is forgettably bad, and Venom deserves a much better movie. But even with all its problems, I honestly didn't mind Venom at all. It's just a pretty meh film with some good moments. I guess you can say that Venom's story could really use an upgrade. A Star is Born. So this was my first exposure to A Star is Born story. All I knew beforehand was that it was about two people who fall in love with each other as they become famous. That's it. So I really didn't know what to expect from Bradley Cooper's first directorial debut. But holy fuck. This movie is so fantastic. A Star is Born is one of the best remakes that I've ever seen in my life. With its incredible direction, wonderful songs, phenomenal performances, beautiful chemistry between Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, and an ending so impactful, shocking, and speechless that I struggled holding back in the tears. Aside from one supporting character that was a little too unredeemable, this film takes the story of its past reincarnations and portrays it in the most beautifully executed and earnest of ways. I absolutely adored A Star is Born, and Bradley Cooper did such an amazing job with it. Easily my favorite of the 2019 Best Picture nominees. First Man. Much like what I said about Hereditary, First Man is another one of those films that I came real close to loving, but I always seem to end up missing the landing. However, I will say that there is a lot of things to love about First Man. The performances are fantastic, there are some very well done scenes, all of the sequences in space are absolutely breathtaking, and Damien Chazelle definitely delivers with his direction. What really pushes the film back for me though is how hollow most of the character development is, how overly long the story feels, and it's very choppy and slow pacing. But while I was somewhat disappointed by First Man, I did still like it a lot and found it to be a pretty well made biopic. Halloween. I don't care what anyone says when I say this, but honestly, I think that Halloween 2018 is better than the original in every single aspect. From its story to its characters, its chilling atmosphere, its scares, its kills, the performances, the cinematography, the score, and Michael Myers being a much bigger threat than he ever was in the first Halloween. This movie does a fantastic job following up the story of the first film and pays homage to the franchise in such a good way without ever losing its own identity, regardless of its redundant title. Even with its dumb twist towards the third act that they do absolutely nothing with, some lame side characters, and the dumb choices that they make, I still really loved Halloween 2018 and thought it was a damn great horror sequel. Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody was one of my most anticipated films of the entire year. I was just so excited to see the life of Freddie Mercury and Queen finally portrayed on the big screen, and Freddie's life alone makes for such a fascinating story. But I honestly feel like I need to apologize for being so impatient for the film because Bohemian Rhapsody is unfortunately the most disappointing film that I've seen in 2018. Aside from some well done scenes, great concerts, solid acting, and Rami Malek giving it his all, the film not only greatly suffers from piss poor editing, pacing, and execution, it also brushes aside all the more interesting parts of Queen and Freddie's lives in favor of being a more safe, generic, formulaic, and bland biopic overall. Look, I'm really sorry if you happen to love this film. By all means, more power to you. But for me, Bohemian Rhapsody is a frustratingly meh film through and through. The only thing more extraordinary than their music is his story. Man, if only the movie could have replicated that. Ralph Breaks the Internet. The first Wreck-It Ralph has always been one of my all-time favorite Disney films. It was such a beautifully animated film with a fantastic story, lovable characters, amazing world building, wonderful video game references, complex themes, and Ralph is one of the most relatable Disney characters I've ever connected to. So needless to say, I was very excited when I first heard that Disney was finally making a sequel for it, and Ralph Breaks the Internet definitely delivers. This film expands on its predecessor in so many ways. It has outstanding world building, beautiful animation, so many great references, a very sweet story, so many relatable themes, and Ralph and Vanellope's relationship is by far the best aspect of this film. While I was somewhat disappointed on how they handled Fix-It Felix and Calhoun, as well as some of the other characters, there are also a few plot holes, and the first one I'd still say is the better movie. Ralph Breaks the Internet is still such a delightfully entertaining, clever, charming, and heartfelt sequel that I absolutely loved. Oh yeah, and please stay for the credits as well. This film gives Deadpool 2 a run for its money when it comes to hilarious mid-credits scenes. Creed 2. Of all the Rocky movies that I've seen, Creed 1 has always been my favorite out of all of them. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and when I heard that they were making a second one with Ivan Drago's son, Victor, being the next big opponent for Adonis Creed to face, you'd bet your ass that I was excited to see it. And when it comes to all the films that I've seen last year, Creed 2 is not only one of those films that completely lived up to all my expectations, it surpassed them as well. I honestly think that it's one of the most perfect sequels that I've ever seen. Much like the first Creed, it has emotionally raw storytelling, incredible direction, phenomenal performances across the board, beautiful character development, especially from Creed and Drago, amazing boxing fight sequences, underlying themes, and it further progresses the development of its story and characters in the most human, genuine, personal, and deeply resonant of ways, making for an overall sequel that not only reaches the heights of its predecessor, but complements it with such perfect execution while staying true to what made most of the Rocky films so special to begin with. I absolutely adored everything about Creed 2, and it's honestly tied with the first Creed as my favorite Rocky movie. Definitely one of 2018's finest films if you ask me. Green Book. Well, if it isn't everyone's favorite Best Picture winner. Okay, sarcasm aside, this film really doesn't deserve the reputation that it's gotten recently. I don't hear a lot of good things thrown its way. However, for me, Green Book is one of those films that I liked at first, but has since gotten better for me the more I thought about it. Now, I will admit that the film does take a while for it to really get going, and the story itself really isn't anything too special, but aside from that, Green Book is a great movie. It has very solid writing, very well executed themes on race. Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali were both fantastic, and Tony and Dr. Shirley's friendship was just so heartfelt, fleshed out, and well done, making for a very well made biopic that I overall loved. Definitely not my favorite of the Best Picture nominees, but hey, it was a much more deserving Oscar winner than whatever overrated trash Mahershala Ali was in last time. Roma. When Roma came out on Netflix, people went nuts. It has gotten insanely good reviews, has been considered a masterpiece by many, and was the biggest frontrunner for Best Picture. So what did I think of it? I thought it was good. Yeah, it was pretty alright. I didn't fall in love with it like everyone else did, and to be honest, it is far from my favorite Best Picture nominee, but before I get into that, let's talk about what I really liked. First off, this movie looks beautiful. The cinematography in this film gives a very somber feel to Mexico. The performances are also very good too. Yalitza Aparicio and Marina de Tavira especially really shine in this movie. Also, the second half of this movie is easily my favorite part. That's where I feel like the story really started going and the drama was pretty effective. With that said though, the first half of this movie is excruciatingly slow, uneventful, and boring. There are so many scenes that go on for way too long, and some even felt completely pointless. So I didn't really connect with the characters as much as I wanted to. In the end though, I do like Roma a lot, but I just don't see it as the masterpiece everyone else makes it out to be. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I was thinking of saving my thoughts on this movie for a future review, and I still plan on making a full-fledged review for this film, but I just wanted to share my overall thoughts with you so you can hopefully understand where I'm coming from. Let me start by saying this. This is not my favorite Spider-Man movie, nor is it my favorite animated movie or even superhero movie of 2018. I thought Kingpin wasn't given enough development, Prowler felt wasted, most of the side characters I felt were underutilized and barely had any interactions with Miles Morales, aside from Spider-Gwen and Peter Parker of course, and the story as a whole was just very familiar to the Spider-Man origin story that I've seen a million times before. However, I still think Into the Spider-Verse is a really great film. The comic book style animation is some of the best I've seen in a movie. The action sequences are fantastic. It has a lot of great Spider-Man references. Most of the characters are very likable and fleshed out, and it does have a very heartfelt and well executed story despite its shortcomings. I especially love how fleshed out Miles and his parents were in this film. So yeah, I still love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse even though I don't see it as the game changer everyone else makes it out to be. Mary Poppins Returns. Even though I never grew up with it, the first Mary Poppins has recently become one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. The story is beautiful, the characters are deep fleshed out and lovable, the performances are phenomenal, all the songs are wonderful, its themes are so complex, and it's one of the most beautifully enchanting films that I've ever seen in my life. Mary Poppins Returns, on the other hand, is just fine. However, I will admit that the performances are very good. There are also some charming moments and well done scenes. The songs are great, it looks gorgeous, and Emily Blunt does a fantastic job filling in the role as Mary Poppins. But with that said, the story lacks focus and feels very derivative. The characters really aren't that interesting. Its mature themes aren't well executed. The climax is terrible, and Colin Firth's character alone nearly killed the whole experience for me. Despite its huge flaws though, I did still like Mary Poppins Returns. I know I might seem harsh on this one, but I do still think it's a charming film that means well. It's just that I really expected a lot more out of a sequel to one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. The Favorite. I was honestly very surprised by how much I ended up loving The Favorite. I will admit that some of the supporting characters aren't really that interesting and the pacing may drag at times, but the film is so amazingly directed and well made that I can easily look past any shortcoming it may have. With its outstanding production design, excellent script, fantastic performances, and how well the story executes its themes on favoritism, it's really not that hard to see why I love The Favorite so much. And when it comes to this Best Picture nominee, I can definitely say,
you were one of my favorites.
Aquaman. I've always had such a complicated relationship with the DCEU when it comes to their movies. There are some that I really liked, but then there are also others that I really did not like. And after how overly mixed I was on Justice League, I really didn't have much hope for the DCEU going forward. Aside from Shazam, of course. But honestly, with all of that said, Aquaman really surprised the hell out of me. It has a very well executed origin story. Arthur Curry, his parents, and the Atlanteans are all very likable and get some pretty good development. The action scenes are awesome. The world building in Atlantis is fantastic. Ocean Master is the second best DCEU villain. And overall, it's a very enjoyable superhero film with a real good heart. Even with its unnecessary inclusion of Black Manta, weird pacing and tone, and familiar plot points, I still liked Aquaman a lot, and the film has honestly gotten better for me ever since. Definitely one of my biggest surprises of 2018. Vice. When it comes to all the Best Picture nominations of 2019, Vice is by far my least favorite. Aside from some really good performances, decent writing, and well done scenes, the film greatly suffers from its really bad pacing, confusing direction, lackluster execution, annoying narration, and how little it focuses on all the important things that happened in Dick Cheney's life, making for an extremely rushed and confusing biopic overall. While it didn't disappoint me as much as Bohemian Rhapsody or bore me as much as The Post, Vice is still a very meh film, and I honestly have no clue why it was even nominated for Best Picture. And those were all the films that I've seen in 2018. So, with all that out of the way, let's take a look at my updated top 5 favorites. Number 5, Black Panther. By far one of the MCU's strongest entries, as well as my second favorite Best Picture nomination from 2019. Number 4, Isle of Dogs. Many people say they see spiders when it comes to their favorite animated film of 2018, but for me, I see dogs and all I see are dogs. Number 3, A Star is Born. Hands down, one of the best remakes that I've ever seen. With its amazing direction, emotionally impactful story, wonderful songs, and impeccable chemistry between Cooper and Gaga, it's easily my favorite Best Picture nomination of 2019. Number 2, Creed 2, a phenomenal sequel that absolutely delivers on every front. It not only reaches the heights of its predecessor, but it complements it in the most perfect of ways with its beyond emotional storytelling, amazing character growth, phenomenal performances, underlying themes, and how it encompasses everything I love about most of the Rocky movies. Number 1, Avengers Infinity War. Easily one of my favorite superhero films ever made. And to anyone who's curious about my thoughts on Avengers Endgame, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. But I still think Infinity War is better. Now before I end this video, let's take a look at the pie chart real quick. According to the pie chart, I adored 8, loved 9, liked a lot 10, liked 4, meh 6, disliked 0, hated 1, and kill it with fire 0. So in total that is 38 films. When it comes to all the films that I've seen in 2018, I'd honestly say it was a pretty good year for movies. Now I will admit that there were quite a number of disappointments as well as a few stinkers, but there also weren't really that many films I've seen that made me want to rip my eyes out. I mean, aside from that, 2018 had a lot of great surprises as well as a lot of films that completely delivered. So yeah, after all that's been said, 2018 was a pretty solid year when it comes to movies. And thus concludes part 2 of my Movies of 2018 video. Once again, I applaud if you managed to watch the whole video, but don't worry, even if you didn't, I definitely don't blame you. And in case you were wondering, no, there will not be a Movies of 2019 video. That would just take too much out of me before I even managed to finish anything for next year, and I honestly felt like making videos for all the movies that I've seen in 2018 really limited me from seeing a lot more movies just so these videos wouldn't be any longer than they already are. Instead though, next year I'll finally try and finish my Spider-Man review, so please stay tuned for that whenever I manage to finish it. I do apologize if it does take me forever to finish it though, because as of right now, I'm starting another crazy ass college semester along with another one right after winter break. As of right now, summer is the only time I can ever seem to really catch a break, so don't be surprised if it does take me that long. And that pretty much wraps everything up for now. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this is Ryan, signing off.